his personality is to be vocal and to push back and whatever. And I was afraid to do those things because I just wanted to be the good girl who's just not a problem.
Fly under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. So then as an adult, then you be all of those things, which we know sort of start to form who you are. And then you walk into relationships with all of those pieces in your tapestry, like kind of nicely woven in. And you don't realize how that's affecting the friendships that you seek out, the relationships you seek out, the attentions that you seek out. And I think when Krista and I found each other was kind of a perfect time.
Welcome to the Becoming Sound podcast, where we dive into the tough stuff and try to find the humor in the hot mess of being an adult child. Join me as we peel back the layers on growing up in dysfunction, navigating substance abuse, mental health challenges, and everything in between. Hi, everybody. I'm Krista.
I'm Shannon.
And this is the Becoming Sound podcast. And this is our little series called Oversharing with her, Shannon.
Guy.
So today we're going to talk about whatever we want.
Yeah. As Krista's plugging everything, and I'm like, so what's our topic today?
Yeah. What is our topic?
She's like, I don't know.
Well, you know what? We're going to give you a little background on us, kind of where we come from. So you know why we are like this. And yeah, how we became friends and stuff like that. We thought we'd just start with that. And then every episode, God only knows.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
It really could go anywhere.
It could. Yeah.
Buckle up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually thought today we could discuss menopause. That has nothing to do with my podcast.
I can't talk about menopause right now.
So hard. Maybe one day in the future. It's a good topic. Anyways.
Is the topic going to be like menopause when you're an adult child?
Yeah, exactly. Like how menopause affects adult children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me tell you, probably the same way it affects everyone else.
But we should look into see how many like women who are like jailed for serious crimes.
Yeah.
Were both of those things. I don't
know. Actually, you'd be surprised
really?
Women killed during menopause. Totally different.
But we digress. Let's cut that out.
Yeah,
maybe.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, we don't
need 2 minutes. We said kill.
Snip. Cut.
Okay. So if you've been listening to this podcast, you kind of know my story. I grew up in a home. My dad was an alcoholic, and it was pretty chaotic a lot of times. My mom was kind of the rock, thank goodness, or you never know where things would have been, but I definitely had one parent in the households who kept it all together. Everyone's has their own stuff going on, and she was just trying to deal. So there was a lot of like emotional neglect and, stuff like that. A lot of chaos. There was some major trauma too. I'm not going to get into that, but it definitely takes a toll on you. And I think growing up with that and then moving into my adulthood, I was always living through a lot of conditioning and stuff like that and not even realizing. And of course, you bring all that garbage into your relationships and your friendships and your marriage and all this stuff. And so it took its toll. And then you're raising kids. And I think that's even harder because you have all of this stuff on your plate and you're just so overwhelmed. You don't know what you're dealing with and you're just repeating patterns and just emotional stuff. It's like anything that served you as a coping mechanism when you're a kid does not serve you well to hang on to in adulthood. And I just found some healing later in life when I was kind of going into my 40s. I started doing a lot of healing stuff and started reaching out. I did a little bit of therapy, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and then here I am.
Healed.
Yeah.
Boom.
Just
like that.
Formerly
traumatized, but now
fully healed.
And ready to solve all your problems.
Exactly. No, we're not. This is like couch therapy, but just for me and her.
For us. Yeah. If you get something from it.
Yeah, true. So tell my beautiful audience a little bit about you.
So when you told me that I would be doing this and
you probably wrote a book, right?
No, I actually didn't. I was thinking about like, okay, so Krista wants me to sort of give some background. And I think for me, there's still this part of me that is like, it's such a delicate balance between, I mean, I want to share, I want to be honest, but I also don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Yeah.
I don't want to
For sure.
have anyone mad at me. Like I've friggin'
Yeah.
got it literally just in the last couple of years, my mom and I
We're going to undo all with one podcast. One podcast, we're going to undo it all.
totally. So I don't want to go there in terms of like any kind of like, I guess, specifics, at least not yet. Maybe later.
That's okay. We'll get there.
Wait for the mini series. So similar to Krista, I grew up in a pretty chaotic house. Would I say there was a rock? I would not say that. Honestly, like what I have learned now is we are a product of what we come from. I know I am and you are, but also reminding myself that my mom is and my dad is, and they did the best with what they had. But our house was chaotic. It was very heightened. There was a lot of fighting. And, it's been since our last podcast that I've been really thinking about it. And yeah, alcohol has played a factor. Would I go so far as to say there's anyone in my household that was an alcoholic? No. But did they use alcohol to cope? I think so. So that was definitely part of it. And, I witnessed a lot of violence. I experienced violence. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of moments I think that were pivotal for me in terms of like trauma. And those things definitely, if you could go back and sort of pick points along that timeline that you and I often talk about that were like key points where things changed, things were decided in my little 5-year-old brain or 8-year-old brain or whatever, like informing me about me and what that must mean about myself. That's when a lot of those things started. So a lot of that negative self-talk to myself started then, that I must be a big pain in the ass. I must be a lot of work. I must be unworthy. I must not be enough, or they would love me. They would stay. They would not be angry with me all the time. They would not have these expectations, right? So, so grew up with kind of a lot of dysfunction, parents who, again, did the best they could, but I think the focus was less on parenting and more on their marriage, which was very kind of up and down. And so I think my brother and I just kind of, did our own thing, maybe a little bit. I think honestly, that was the time too. I think it was when you come from dysfunction or whatever, you really are kind of left to your own devices and sort of doing, for myself, I think probably for you, trying to be as quiet as possible, to make as small of a fuss as possible, just to sort of not cause any kind of waves whatsoever. I mentioned in the last podcast that my brother, caused a lot of those waves. And I think that is just his personality, right? His personality is to be vocal and to push back and whatever. And I was afraid to do those things because I just wanted to be the good girl who's just not a problem, right?
Fly under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. So then as an adult, right, then you be all of those things, which we know sort of start to form who you are. And then you walk into relationships with all of those pieces in your tapestry, like kind of nicely woven in. And you don't realize how that's affecting the friendships that you seek out, the relationships you seek out, the attentions that you seek out or don't seek out, right? And I think when Krista and I found each other was kind of a perfect time for me anyway, because I was living on my own. My parents had moved away and I stayed in Edmonton and went to school. And I think that's when I started to, I don't think blossom's the right word because that sounds very like.
Well, it's the first time you're away from your parents and you actually get to see what life is like without all that. Like,
yeah.
Out from that umbrella, right? And the same thing for me. Exact same.
Yeah.
I was just branching out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I moved out, I think 4 months after I met you.
Yeah, you did.
That's
right.
And it was like a whole new world opens up for you because you feel free.
Yeah.
Felt free. And not that I didn't go home. And my mom will tell you I went home to grocery shop. So freaking true.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't afford anything. But
Yeah.
it's not that I didn't want to go home or I didn't see my parents or whatever. But it was like I felt like I was finally able to live my own life and do what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And to not be sort of
Yeah.
under the thumb of someone
Yeah.
or having somebody judge decisions, or even just being able to make a decision that wasn't made for us, or
and being away from the chaos too, because for the first time in my life I didn't have to worry about what I was coming home to. That big vigilant state, I wasn't living in that so much anymore. And so I felt really free. And it also opened up the door for a little bit of crazy, reckless behavior too, because it was like no holds barred, right? Like no one's telling me what to do.
Like kid meat candy store.
Yeah, exactly. Meat candy store.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we partied a lot, and we had like a schedule.
Yeah, we did.
We did. It was like every night there was a different bar.
A different bar with a different special night. And oh man, because I've reread my diaries, and every night I'm writing like, just got back from this place.
Yeah.
Next night, just got back from that place. It's like, hi, you go to university. Like, where did that in there?
I don't even remember that you were in
university. I know.
Like, I don't even think you studied, did you?
No.
You're pretty smart, so you probably didn't have to.
If I was smart, I would have studied and done a bit better than I did. But I think it was, like you said, I think just being away from that and kind of creating my own path.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said, getting away from that was sort of like freeing for you. For me, I don't think I even clocked that was something until the longer that you're away and then you go back. Like for you, your parents were just outside the city, right?
Yeah.
Or then in the city.
Minutes at home.
Yeah. For me, my parents were 3 hours away. And so when I would go back home or I would spend time with them here, that's when I started to realize, I think for the first time, like, oh, it's a little like heightened, right? I don't think I even realized it was heightened because you don't know. That's like, that's your reality, right?
Yeah.
And so then when you are away from it for a bit and you go back and you're like, wow, like just kind of blow ups a lot and arguments and everybody's yelling, and then it's done and you're just like, what the frig just happened?
Yeah.
And, and especially then so now we're jumping ahead to way once I ended up, being with the person I was going to end up marrying. And I mentioned how chill, he was and his household seemed, and everybody just sort of seemed to get along. And I was like, wow, like this is great. Nobody's yelling. Nobody's, throwing a tantrum about something. And then when I would spend time with my family, and I don't want to shit all over my family. It's not that. It's just the dynamic.
I don't want to shit on our family either. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's just
I love my dad. I love my mom. I loved our family,
Of course.
But it had its problems.
Yeah, it was the dynamic that you don't really realize is a dynamic or is something until you're away from it a little bit.
Yeah, all that childhood programming. You take it with you, but you don't really know you're doing it. You don't know what you're doing because there's no name for it. You can't give it and give it recognize it early on in your early adulthood.
You know what else came up for me reading all of that stuff was the story that Shannon tells is I never spoke up for myself. I never had a voice, which is true for sure when I was younger. And it wasn't until like adulthood, like, having kids and all of that stuff, which is definitely also true. Those things definitely came up for me. But what I noticed when I was reading my diaries and stuff like that is I definitely had moments. In fact, I would go so far as to say I was a shit disturber when it came to like stirring things. Like I was like the justice warrior for everybody, right? I'm in there. It's like, what? She said that. Let's go talk to her right now. I will. Let's go, right? I would like get right there involved in things The family that I lived with was lovely, but again, everybody's got their own dynamic. And so there was some pushback with a couple of people that I lived with. And so as I'm reading, I'm like, oh God, I forgot about that little tiff I had with that person or um, somebody at school or whatever. So what I do realize now as I read those things is, yeah, I definitely was practicing what it might feel like to like push back.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Two, the aggression that I was experiencing at home. This was the first time that I could be that.
Yeah, you could be, because you were the good girl.
I was the good girl. And so now it's like,
aggressive.
I'm going to be aggressive. Yeah. I'm going to stir up that thought. I'm going to confront that person and be confrontational in that way. But you know who I didn't do that with? My mom, my dad, my brother, people who were really close to me that mattered.
Yeah.
There's no way I would ever say anything to
fear,
because there's a fear of loss and a fear of rejection and all of that. So I definitely was practicing those things and acting out, I guess, if you want to call it that, in those ways with people that didn't really matter, that they didn't really have a dog in my fight. So it's just like, whatever, I'm just going to. Yeah. And so I feel like I kind of became, in that little circle that we hung in, I was like the sassy one, right? Yeah, oh, she's the sassy pants. She's the one that's going to.
Still sassy, don't let her.
A little. But at that time, that was new for me.
Yeah.
And it was like I was trying it on. I was trying on this new outfit, being assertive, but only with certain people.
Yeah.
And the ones that really mattered, there's no way in hell I would ever have spoken up for myself. And then fast forward later into like a marriage or into when things started escalating with my family and our relationship, which we won't get into, but I still would not say things. I wouldn't. And then when I did finally, like in my family, when I did, the shit hit the fan, right? Just like I knew it would.
When you start standing up for yourself, or you start realizing that maybe have a voice there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But that didn't come without consequence. That's having a voice with my family for sure.
Yeah. And I was complete opposite. When you talk about this now, I realize, first of all, when I became a teenager, that's when I kind of flipped. I went from like this quiet little mousy, good girl kind of thing, try to just do everything right.
Yeah.
And then when I was a teenager, I just started fighting with my dad. Like I realized that the chaos, like I became manipulative. Like with my dad, I would start a fight just to get his reaction, or I would just get under his skin for, I don't even know. I can't even remember the reasons.
Yeah.
But it was like I was trying to assert myself, and I was like in this rebellious state. Yeah, he just couldn't do any right, you know? And so it was chaotic between us. I would start fights for sure. And I realized that as I moved into those late teens, early 20s, I would be super good and nice with outside people. But the people who I was closest to, with the exception of you, but the relationships I was in, that's where the chaos would start. Because I would bring that up in those relationships. So it was like I was repeating this pattern with my dad. And yet my friends, or the people I worked with, or the people, outside of that circle, and even people I didn't know, it was like, oh, just keep it together, be like your little perfect self, do everything right. Don't rock the boat. Don't bring chaos. No confrontation. I was terrified of confrontation. And yet I took jobs where I was in leadership roles. I would excel at leadership roles, but like terrified of confrontation with that kind of thing. So it's like in my relationships with the people who are closest to me, that's where I felt safe to have that chaos.
Right.
That like
that was your comfort place.
Yeah, it would start. Things would be going too good, and I'd be like, subconsciously, I'd be like, too nice, not your safe zone. And so I'd start creating havoc. I would start acting up. I'd start nitpicking. All this kind of stuff would come. And that was in my relationships. This happened with other friends too, but with you, it wasn't like that. Yeah, as you were saying that, I realized I did the exact opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a little background on our steps. We're not really. I mean, we're really normal, but we have some issues.
I think we're normal.
I think we turned out pretty good. Honestly, we're both really nice people.
Yeah.
You know, we raised good kids. And when Shannon was talking about, you know, how she was attracted her partner, because it was like stable and calm and everything was calm.
Yeah.
I attracted my husband for the exact same reasons. Kind of. I saw this family who seemed very close-knit, and I craved that. I was craving a family that had a lot of people in it that all liked each other and it was close, because although I love my family, I felt like at the time that we weren't close because there was a lot of fighting. And so I was just craving that calm, that like happy kind of, you know, the white picket fence shit. God, I remember a boyfriend saying that to me at one time, is you just want the white picket fence thing? And I was like, yes, I do. Like, you know, I did. I craved that. And in reality, it's a facade, right? Like nobody has the white picket fence thing. When you have opposite that, you just crave that.
Totally. Yeah. When you were dating who would became your husband, I remember you with that family, and I could feel it for you. I remember like just that feeling of just being pulled in. Yeah. And just like, come on, like just come in, and
they do everything together.
But for me, the other part was that my parents had moved away. And so, you know, in some ways, I kind of felt like this little waif who was just kind of like part of my abandonment issues for sure. And so, having this family that had dinner together every Sunday and invited us over for dinners and all of that. And it just felt so like, I don't know.
Like not the same with
like what you see on TV.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'd say leave it to Beaver, but we're in our 50s, so nobody.
No, even that. Okay, I was trying to think as you were saying that. I was like, what TV show would have been like?
Yeah,
I don't know. But anyways, like it just seemed like so ideal, and it was like that definitely was a lure when you're missing that.
Yeah. And as you go into that, then you start unpacking in that marriage, right? You want to feel safe to do so, but there's a lot of things that come with marriage that are stressors. All of a sudden, any little trigger starts bringing this stuff to the surface. And then you realize a lot of things. And it wasn't all me. My husband had his stuff too. We both come together, both needing our own therapy.
You know, I just had a conversation with a mental health professional. It's hard to explain, but it was a person.
You didn't go to therapy?
I didn't go to therapy, but I was speaking to a therapist. Yeah. And the topic of sort of, you know, what did he come from? Like my ex, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there were so many I wish I could have talked to you after that because I should have called you because it was just, there were so many things that came up. But one of the things was, you know, oh, well, he must have come from maybe this or the trauma or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. And she stopped and she was like, you know, like he never told you? No. Think about it, right? You know who he is. Like we never, which is so bizarre.
I know.
When you see like guys now, and I don't know if it's the generation, but they talk about their feelings. I don't know. The ones on Instagram do.
Right? All you TikTok people, you are being so no.
Anyway,
no, I get it.
There are guys out there who share and who talk and who whatever,
it's a different time. It's a different.
Is that what it is?
There are more people talking openly about their emotional stuff, about all this stuff.
Yeah.
So yes, I get it. There's a lot of guys talking about it.
But I mean,
on social media.
You married that person. I married this person, and I'm glad that I did. I mean, like again, there were lots of great parts of that relationship for years, and I got my kids from that relationship, and you know, but to look back and to be asked, well, what did he ever tell you about, you know, his childhood or growing up or what it would? Nothing.
Me neither.
Like literally nothing.
Yeah. Like
when I talk about anything that I might know about his family growing up is more from his sisters.
Yeah.
Who I was friends with and who shared things with me about kind of the dynamic growing up or whatever, which again, I really didn't know much, but it's just shocking to me to realize how little I knew about that because he never talked about those types of things, but also neither did I.
Yeah.
And so I know I shared a couple of things later, which we talked
Yeah.
about how that was just
Come up
like,
little bits at a time.
yeah. And I mean, it's not that he didn't want to hear it. It was just like he didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like, ma'am, we don't do that here.
Do you really think though, like, this is just my perspective, I think, coming from the place that I did, when I got into a new relationship, the last thing I wanted to do was talk about my shit.
Oh, me too.
You know what I mean? Like, I thought, oh, great. Here's a person who doesn't know anything about my family, who doesn't have any preconceived notions,
Yeah.
who doesn't have a judgment on me or anything. And I felt, I know this is my programming, but I really felt like I would be judged.
Mhm.
And so I held a lot of that close to the chest.
Mhm.
I held a lot of it in,
Mhm.
and I didn't even feel comfortable, divulging that to my husband at the time.
Yeah.
And so I never did. And the relationship before that, I never just sat down with my new, boyfriend or something, even a year in, and been like, well, I'd like to tell you about my horrible childhood and all the chaos. They'd be like, excuse me, I'm just going to the bathroom.
See him drive away.
Exactly. Like, you just didn't do that.
Mhm.
And I don't know if when you get into a new relationship, if they're even doing that. Look, I'm not in my 20s, but I think even nowadays, yeah, everyone's talking about it on social media, but are they really getting into a new relationship and 6 months in, they're sitting down and talking about all their garbage?
So eventually, yeah, I do. I think you don't get married. I think you
gotta
maybe
let
don't
us
get married
know.
until you've had that conversation.
But let us know, is this what young people are doing? Like, are you having this straight up conversation about where you came from, your childhood, what it was like, how you're feeling, like these programs?
They
Like,
do.
are you recognizing this stuff?
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why I know this because
Okay.
my daughter, who is an adult, she's 26, and she had come out of a relationship that was kind of long term, and then was thinking about getting back in the dating scene. And one of the things she said to me was, "Ugh, like I can't do this again. Like I can't like unpack all my stuff again." And
Oh,
right,
yes.
and
She's
so
actually
she
laying
is.
it all out.
This is what this is normal.
her.
That's like, why is it so weird to us that people are
know,
doing the
right?
normal thing, which is allowing yourself to be
I
seen by your partner?
This
is
is
just
why we're like
what?
this.
Is why we're like this. Did we just answer our question?
We did.
2 podcasts. All right, shut her down.
All
We're
right.
done.
We're done. Our work here is
Oh my God. No, they do. I think that is the normal thing, Krista. And I think that we did not come from
no, I guess we
a situation where
I know there's other people out there listening though. You came from the same stuff and you didn't.
you wouldn't be listening
Yeah,
if
exactly. If you didn't.
that's why you're here.
But yeah, and that's fantastic. I hope my kids are doing the same
Yeah.
in their relationships currently. That just wasn't the norm.
No.
I was terrified to tell any of my stuff. It wasn't even actually a thought process because I just wanted to like leave it in the background. I just wanted it to be gone.
Well, the thing is, and then
Right?
again, here's the difference. If we weren't in a place where we were ready to deal with our own stuff, which I know I wasn't and you weren't, that as if we're going to be unloading it on this, like we don't want them to run away.
Like, I wasn't even willing to go to therapy at that point.
No.
Like, I didn't even think to myself, maybe I should talk to someone about this. It
No.
wasn't even a thought process.
But the difference is
yeah.
this generation, our kids
Yeah.
they are going to therapy.
Well, it's more out in the open.
It's more out in the open. It's more accepted to go to therapy. In fact, it's almost like required.
Yeah.
For a lot of them, it's like they go to therapy just to keep themselves mentally healthy.
Yeah. There's a
right. And
I
it's
get
not necessarily that you go because you've got this deep trauma you need to unpack, or maybe you do. But a lot of times it's just, like I have heard from kids in that age group, like, I want somebody who appreciates therapy. I want somebody who understands the value of therapy and of talking.
Who's willing to work on themselves.
Who's willing to work on themselves, who's willing to like go to a couples therapist if we need to, or to just make sure we're checking in and helping us. How can I be there and show up for you better? How can you show up for me better? all of the healthy things in my brain
Mm-hmm.
that none of the things that,
No.
like, we didn't do any of those things.
No, it honestly wasn't even a conversation.
No.
And it wasn't just a conversation within my marriage. It wasn't even a conversation with friends.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that kind of stuff. I mean, we were too busy, having fun and
Yeah.
and not really thinking about what was in our suitcase. We weren't unpacking that stuff. Just wasn't a thought process, really. And later in my marriage, things really got chaotic for me. And one day I was like, holy shit, like I need to go get some help. Like
Mhm.
I need therapy for this. I knew I needed to go talk to somebody. And that started the ball rolling of me starting to heal some of this stuff, because I was really an angry person. Like I was not that way in my early 20s.
Which is why
My goodness, in my 30s.
Krista did not present that way at all.
No, not at all.
I think you were like a closet angry
Oh,
person.
closet angry person.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why. And, the first time I went to a therapist, she's like, it's because you have depression. And I'm like, I'm not laying in bed all day. Like, I didn't understand.
You were
the
like
whole-
functional depression.
Yeah.
Like, you were like,
Well, I didn't understand what depression was. And you can be very angry and very high functioning and still have depression. You don't have to be laying in bed all day, wanting to sleep and not wanting to look at the world. For me, I was in a depressive state,
yeah.
but it come out as I was so angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at the world. And every little thing was a trigger for me. And so that was triggering this anger. And what happened was my dad passed away, and my kids were really little when he passed away. And all of this stuff started coming to the surface when my dad died.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize it because I had not dealt with that. I've not dealt with my dad issues at all. Nobody, I didn't talk about it with my sister or my mom, nothing.
Or like, I remember when your dad passed away, and I was very sad.
Talk about it with
I remember, no, not at all. I remember like the years leading up to that. When you got married, all of, like, in that time, I just knew that it was not a good relationship that you had with him. I think you might have thrown me a couple of stories to kind of give me some context.
I didn't even have a relationship with him.
No, not that.
He died. And you know what?
That
After, bawled my eyes out at the funeral, and my sister and I had a good talk, and then I just shoved all that back down and carried on my merry way. And then just so much came up. And that's when the anger started to come up. And I didn't recognize that at first for what it was. And I tried to push it down. And then I got to a point where I was like a kettle ready to boil over. And I snapped at my kids like really bad. And I was like, holy shit, get a handle on this.
Yeah.
This is crazy. So yeah, I did go to therapy, and that helped immensely. And I did go on some medication for a bit. I didn't like it. I don't advocate for medication or not or whatever. You do you.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to your medical professional. For me, it made me feel like really like a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
It made me like just zone right out. You know? And I was calmer. Yes, was calm with the kids. But I only lasted like maybe a year on it, and I went off it. And that's when I really started to just do some other healing stuff to manage it. And yeah, it got a lot better.
I think like your dad passing away was like the catalyst.
Oh, it was
right?
a huge trigger.
Yeah. And then it was like, I think for all of us, once you start, it's like picking a scab, right? It's like once you start unpacking a little, or acknowledging something, or remembering an event, and then kind of that leads to the next, and that leads to the next. And then it's like, what do they say? Like, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Like it's coming out.
So
it's coming out. And then what do you do with that, right? Yeah. Then hopefully the next generation is going to be, apparently, turns out, according to Instagram, they're going to have somebody there who's going to like help them unpack those things and figure out how to navigate. I wish that we would have had that, but
me too.
It's okay. Like, Krista, here's the thing.
It is what it is. Exactly.
I would rather I would rather be 54 and happy and healing and acknowledging my stuff and moving the way I'm moving in the world now than still carrying that shit into my 40s and my 50s and my 60s, right?
Me too.
And like, unfortunately, what came with that was a loss of a marriage. And, but what came from that is like finding myself and figuring out who I actually really am and being okay with that and loving myself and accepting myself and drawing some boundary lines with people in my life, family members or whatever, so that we can then have a decent relationship. I don't want to cut people out, but there certainly was a time that was my go-to, was like, well, you're dead to me. You're dead to me and dead to me. Like,
I'm not laughing because that's funny. I laugh
true.
because she is like bang on.
Not immediately. I put up with a phenomenal amount of
Yeah.
bullshit. But then when I got to that point,
that was like under the scene.
You are
like
dead to me.
Under the curtain, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you're done.
Yeah, you're done. And that's it. I'm done. Whereas now I feel like I can forgive, and what the whole thing, you forgive not for them, you forgive for yourself.
Yeah. And you find compassion you have more compassion for people, right? And
yeah.
I think now I'm more able to think about what they must be going through. Like they have their own stuff. I can't cut people out because I understand they have their own stuff. Yeah. But I do have boundaries on people that are soul sucking and negative Nancy's. Like, I don't want that in my life either. So when you get a little older, you realize it's just so much easier to have boundaries and to actually like do stuff for yourself.
And that it's okay. And the sun's still going to rise the next day.
Exactly. You don't have to please everybody.
Exactly.
You have to be friends with everybody, because that was me when I was younger. It was
yeah.
Can
you hear them? Can you hear those dogs?
Yeah.
They're like, all right, wrap it up. Yeah.
Exactly.
You're healed.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. So that's just a little bit about us.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear if you guys want us to talk about any topics. Like, let us know. We'd love some interaction. And
yeah.
And what kind of tangents we can go off on.
Which this entire thing, I don't know how much we've recorded, but that was...
it says 39 minutes. Look at us.
39 minutes. Considering we didn't know what we were going to talk about.
39.
Yeah. Well, are we done?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, I got to go.
Shannon's done. She's got to go. Anyways, thank you for being with us.
Bye.
And we will see you next time on Becoming Sound. Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Becoming Sound. If this episode resonated with you in some way, please share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It helps to get this information out to more people who may need it. If you have a sec, I would love a follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. While you're there, hit the 5-star rating and give me a review. When you're scrolling, follow me on my social platforms, and I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Have a fabulous day, lots of love and gratitude from me. Please note, the views, information, and opinions expressed during the Becoming Sound podcast series are solely those of the individuals involved. The content of this podcast is to educate, inform, and for entertainment purposes only. This podcast series and the content presented does not constitute for medical or other professional advice or services. If you are in crisis or in need of help, please contact your medical or professional provider.